So my topic then is technology in the classroom, and it includes AI, of course, tools to be used cautiously, critically, and selectively, to be used, certainly. But sometimes we need to think very carefully about how to use them so that they are optimally effective. Some of the ways teachers use digital tools in the classroom are the following. Learning management systems like Moodle. I don't know how many of these you use. I'm going to ask you in a moment. um, for communication with students, for distance learning, if you have a Zoom lesson like we're doing now, to plan lessons, for reference, dictionaries and grammars and so on, to compose or edit texts, to design exercises or tests, to create or access pictures, to explain language, and for correction. Now, I would really like to know, those of you who are on the Zoom, actually participating in the Zoom, I hope that we can show a poll, and I would like you to answer the questions which are shown on the poll. So here is the poll. Can you see that? And can you answer it? Can you
Yes,
write in the chat box if you can see it?
Yep, we can see it.
Okay, the presenters themselves can't answer, but our participants can. So please fill in your answers, how much you use these different tools. It'll take a minute or two, maybe 3 minutes. I see people already adding, and then at the end I'll stop it and we'll allow you to see what all your co-participants have written and how much we as a group use these different tools for the different purposes. You'll need to scroll down in order to answer the different questions. Thank you very much for participating. That looks really interesting. Right, we'll give it another half a minute. There's a couple of people who still haven't participated, and then I'll show the results to everybody so you can all see what you and your co-participants have answered. Okay, we have 72% of the participants have participated. So I'm going to stop the poll in a second and we'll have a look and see what the answers are. So I'm stopping it now. And I should be able to display it. Here we go. Can you see the results? Can you see the results? Can you write in the chat box if you can see the results? What I can see here is number one, learning management systems. The majority is sometimes, but a lot of people, some people use it all the time. Um, the next question was to communicate with students, and this a lot of people use all the time. For the third question, which was for distance learning, not all the time, but a lot. Yes, well, during the pandemic, we used it all the time, but now people still use it a lot, but certainly not all the time. Most of the time, we're doing ordinary face-to-face lessons. Question 4, for reference, most people use it quite a lot, either all the time or a lot. Number 5, to plan lessons. That's interesting. You use it a lot to plan lessons. It's something which I do very little, but I still have something to learn on that. Um, to design or edit exercises or text, and this is where AI has come in, where we can very, very quickly make an exercise, create an exercise from a text, or create a test, or to make something easier or more difficult. To explain grammar or vocabulary, quite a lot, most people. And finally, to correct written work, um, sometimes, not all the time. Most teachers actually correct written work themselves, not using AI, but there's a group who say that they use it sometimes. Okay, so this is really interesting. All of you, in fact, the use the technology in one way or another, either sometimes or even frequently. Very few people don't use it at all. And I think this is fairly typical, although it's typical of people who, like you, are really interested in professional work, and in the way you function as teachers. In a way, the participants of webinars like this are self-selected. They're people who really care and already know quite a lot. So perhaps you don't represent all teachers all over the world, but you represent the teachers who care and who are interested in professional development. So let's move on and talk a bit about how it's used. And firstly, I just want to make a preliminary comment, that digital tools in teaching, and particularly AI, I think we need to see it not as a revolution. That popularly people say, oh, it's going to revolutionize teaching. I don't think it has revolutionized teaching. I think teaching basically has remained as it is, although there is evolution which is affected by the development of tools. An interesting article by Pigram, very, very recent one. And I've given you all the references at the end of this presentation, so you'll be able to read yourselves if you're interested in looking up the articles or books which I mentioned. Interesting to compare the blackboard, which came in the middle of the 19th century, very late actually, only sort of a century and a half ago. Um, and it immediately evolutionized teaching. Instead of the teacher standing up and saying everything, they could now write it on the board and the students could see it. But perhaps a more telling contrast is the pocket calculator, which was introduced in the late 20th century. And a lot of people said, oh, this is going to revolutionize the teaching of mathematics. Students will be able to work out sums for themselves. They won't need us. They'll cheat. No, the problem with AI today, very popularly, is students cheating on their essays and getting AI to write their essays for them. And at the time of the pocket calculator, the mathematics teachers were saying, oh, they won't do the sums. They'll just ask the calculator to do it for them. As it turned out, the pocket calculator did not revolutionize the teaching of mathematics. It certainly helped, it streamlined, It was a very useful tool and teachers learned to use it. And I think the same is true of digital tools and particularly AI in the teaching of English and other subjects. But there's some questions we need to ask. How do I know when it is or is not beneficial to use digital tools in the classroom? It's partly common sense, but I think it's something which we need to think about. How do I know which tools are more or less useful? There is so much available today that it's difficult to know what to choose. I mean, you can't really keep up with the development of what's coming in all the time. And to get to know the tools and then decide which is useful, which is less useful, which is perhaps useful for this class and not for another class, all these questions. And the next question, how can I combine the use of the digital and AI tools with my own teaching? Where do I need to do my own interaction with the students face to face, and where can I use conventional tools, and where is it really effective to use the technology? So I'm going to look at some criteria for skillful use of the technology, and with some practical examples. So, in principle, the question we need to ask is not, here's a digital tool, how can I use it? Or how can I use digital resources in my class lesson? The question is, I have a teaching learning goal or problem or issue. Is there a way that AI or a digital instrument can help me teach? Here's a picture for you. What is it? Anyone want to write in the chat box what this is a picture of? No writing yet. I don't, maybe the chat box is the chat box working? Not sure. But the answer is no chat box. The answer is that it's Mount Everest. And why I've got a picture of Mount Everest is that there's a famous story about George Mallory, who was one of the first climbers of Everest, and in fact tragically died on his last attempt. But when he was asked why climb Everest, in fact, why climb any mountain, he famously replied, because it's there, because it's there. And sometimes I think that some teachers are using the digital tools, a particular digital tool, because it's there for no reason other than it's there and we should be using it. In other words, it's a solution looking for a problem. And I don't think we should be looking at solutions and looking for problems for them to solve. We should be looking at our problems and thinking whether or not the digital materials or tools can help us. Here's an example for you. Something called DDL, data-driven learning. And the idea is that instead of telling students this word works like this, and this grammar works like this, or these are the collocations of this particular word, you tell students to look up a concordance, a list of occurrences of a particular item in a corpus, in a database, a huge database of English texts, and find out for themselves what is the most common way something is used or what other words it tends to go with. Instead of the teacher telling them, the students go to the primary data and find out for themselves, student discovery. So that's why it's called data-driven learning. Students find out for themselves from the corpus data the answers to questions such as, for example, how common is this expression? Or what are the most common collocations of something, or what is the most usual meaning of this word? For example, what would you say is the most common meaning of the word pretty? I can't see that the text block is working, so just think for yourselves, what is the most meaning of the word? You could, so there's a possibility of the teacher telling them, and there's a possibility of going to the data from, in this case, the Cambridge corpus, and looking to see how pretty is used.
Bruce says
Um, and
beautiful. Alum says nice.
if you look at the data here, you'll see that in fact pretty is used mainly to mean quite or quite a lot, rather than beautiful. I think the last thing, the last sentence in your screen shows it meaning nice to look at, which is the sort of original conventional answer. And okay, so it's quite fun to look these up and find out what the answer is. But the question is, let me move on. And there are some positive research results. I've given a reference here where they say this works really well and the students really like it and they learn well from it, but how much time does it take to do? Jeremy Harmer has this lovely acronym TITO, time in, time out. And uh, how much time are you putting into a procedure compared to how much time, uh, real learning time, are you getting out of it? So compared to the time, as it says on the screen here, I'll just read it out, compared to the time invested in preparing, setting up, and actually doing the activity, how much real learning was there? Is it proportionate? Is it reasonable? And if you look at DDL, the example I just gave you, okay, the students learn from it, and it's interesting and it's challenging and motivating and all the rest of it. But the teacher could have given them that information in a fraction of the time it takes to go through and work out from all these occurrences in the corpus. Is it worth it? Is it worth the extra investment of time in terms of the learning which comes out of it? And I'm not sure what the answer is in any particular case. In the case of DDL, I think mostly it tends not to be worth it, but there may be cases where it is. But my point is, the point I'm trying to make here is it is a question which needs to be asked and answered. What have I put into it and what am I getting out of it? Was it worth it? In terms also of financial investment, I'll give you an example in a moment. Did the money I invested in it, was it worth the what I got out of it? For example, so DDL, was it worth asking the student to look it up from the evidence in the corpus, or would I have been better off actually just telling them what the answer is? Um, sorry, I've lost the screen for a second. Right, my next example is Kahoot, which I used to use a lot in the classroom. Then I realized that actually I was spending much, much more time preparing the questions than the students were actually learning from it in the classroom. The students really liked it. It was very popular. It's very popular worldwide. You'll find lots and lots of it on the internet. But the question is it worth it? Is it worth the investment? If you're going to use it again and again, a Kahoot questionnaire, then yes, it probably is worth it. But if you're only going to use it once, I think you need to think again. I just stopped using it, though. It's very attractive and fun, but it just wasn't worth the huge amount of investment in terms of preparation time compared to the amount of benefit I got out of it in the classroom. My third example is the interactive whiteboard. Which it's not a question of time here as much as investment. It turns out that the research which has been done on the interactive whiteboard indicates that it does not lead to any substantial increase in learning. It's fun to use, and it's one of these because it's there things. It's because it's there I ought to be using it. But I've been to visit schools recently where interactive whiteboards that were bought 10 years ago are gathering dust, and student teachers hardly use them at all as interactive whiteboards. They use them as a whiteboard, or they use it as a screen for projecting from their projector, but they don't actually use the things that only an interactive whiteboard can do. So that's really an item which a lot of people have got disillusioned about. In contrast, there are some digital tools which do pass the Taito test, which are really worth using, and some of them which you certainly are probably using yourselves. Chatbots, for example. There's only a certain amount of talking a student can do in the classroom. You've got a classroom of 30, 40 students in the classroom, even 20. Then how much can any particular student talk in the classroom? If you're in a full class forum, and if you put them into pairs, they'll talk more. But even so, the amount of talking that any particular individual student can do in a large classroom is limited. You can back this up by asking them to have a conversation with an avatar using one of the very effective and increasingly effective chatbot programs on the internet, record themselves, and then send to you. And it supplements in-person talking. Video backup to audio for listening comprehension. The fact, for example, it sounds trivial, but it's really, really nice with, I don't know how many of you know about the function on YouTube that you can actually slow down the text so that if you want them to listen to a YouTube, but it's going too fast for them, you can, at the click of a mouse, slow it down. And that's really effective in helping them to understand. Accessing pictures, I don't know how many of you are from my generation, probably none. When I was a young teacher, I spent hours and hours leafing through color magazines to find pictures. Today, it's so easy either to access a picture from Google Images or any of the other programs, or to get one of the AI programs to draw a picture for you according to your own specification. Designing supplementary exercise. Again, AI does this using TWE or one of the other teacher programs. Recording presentations so that students, you can listen to a presentation quietly at home and give feedback rather than spending an inordinate amount of lesson time on it. I want to move on now to another point, which is comparing low-tech materials versus high-tech materials and what they give us, because it's not always the high-tech which is better. Sometimes it is, sometimes it isn't. I want to look at some particular examples. In some learning situations, low-tech may actually be better. Reading and writing, paper or screen. And what I want to do at this point is ask you to do another poll. And this one is very, very quick. I can't find the poll now. We might need to.
Yes, I've lined the
Thank
poll.
you. Thank you very much. Okay, there's only 2 questions here. So can you fill in? When reading for pleasure, do you prefer reading from paper or from a screen? If you're reading for information, do you prefer paper or a screen? Thank you for filling that in. That's great. Mm, mm. Okay, I'll give another few seconds for people to add their preferences. Okay, let's look and see the interim results of this. What we see here is that with regard to reading for pleasure, most people prefer paper books. And reading for information, it's pretty balanced. Slight majority reading from a screen, but certainly not absolutely definite, certainly not a large majority. I prefer myself, even reading for pleasure, I prefer a screen, but I'm definitely in the minority here. And I've done this in face-to-face. Let's go back to my main screen. I've done this in face-to-face sessions in a lot of conferences. I've asked the audience to raise their hands if they prefer reading from paper. I haven't said exactly what. If they're in general, they prefer reading from paper or reading from screen. And the huge majority um, say they prefer paper. And this includes the young teachers, Gen Z, the really the ones who grew up using screens and using cell phones and tablets and laptops. And even so, most people actually um, prefer reading from paper. So, and there is research that backs this up. And there is also consistent evidence that using paper and handwriting tends to enhance learning. For example, um, a piece of research on vocabulary retention. One group of students was asked to write down by hand the new vocabulary, and the other was asked to type it out onto a screen. And the ones who wrote by hand remembered the vocabulary better. You can read the article yourselves and see the exact statistics here and the techniques. Reading comprehension, again, comparing students who read from the screen for information as opposed to those who read from paper, and finding that on the whole, those who read from paper remembered the content of what they were reading better. And paper versus digital dictionaries. Paper dictionaries tend to lead to better retention of the words that were looked up. In other cases, high tech tends to function better. And this is why I'm saying you need to be critical and see where the low tech and where the high tech is better. For example, simplifying or elaborating a course book text, AI can do it much better than I can. I sometimes will need to check out how an AI tool has simplified or elaborated a text, but it'll do it much better and faster than I can. Finding an appropriate picture, I've already mentioned that. Communication with students and parents, there's no comparison with what we can do today using high tech rather than laboriously writing out letters by hand, recording grades, reviewing vocabulary at home. All these things are things which the high tech does really well. So it's not that I'm saying, yes, low tech is better. I'm saying there are things which I listed earlier, which low tech does better. There are things which high tech does better. And what we as teachers need to know is which is appropriate when. So basically, The skilled teacher knows how to choose using his or her professional judgment. But often, actually, we don't need to choose at all because we can use both. And what I'm about to do now is look at some cases where um, you can use both, and it's the judicious use of both combined where we get the advantage of the one and the advantage of the other combined in a particular lesson or for a particular teaching aim. That's where our teaching expertise comes into play, and that's where our students can really benefit. So here are some examples of combination of low and high tech. So online plus face-to-face classrooms. The research indicates that on the whole, online teaching works better. It leads to better learning, but there are cases where there are too many students and or they're living too far away, or the example of the pandemic, or any particular situation where for some reason you cannot get the students together, when face-to-face classrooms are an adequate, perhaps not brilliant, but an adequate substitution for face-to-face. So online and face-to-face complement each other. It's not one instead of the other, or one is better than the other. Chatbots plus face-to-face for oral work, and I'll be referring to Nikki Hockley again later. She has some really interesting stuff on the use of high tech in teaching. So oral work, I think chatbots on their own are not adequate because most of our interaction is actually with live people we're talking to, interlocutors, but face-to-face, but chatbots can supplement and give the sheer talking time that the students need to get sufficient practice in oral fluency. Flashcards, vocabulary flashcards. So you've got Quizlet or quizzes, which give you digital flashcards, but there are things you can do with actual card, paper flashcards, which you can't do online, sort of exchanging and doing things with them in the classroom. And you need to use both, I think. Simply pictures on screen, pictures on paper, and realia, actually using actual objects in the classroom. Are both important. Um, and finally, I don't know how many of you use mini whiteboards, these little whiteboards, which each student has one. You use erasable markers. You write answers on them and hold them up to show other people or share with other people, and then just wipe them off and use them again. And they're a really useful tool I've been seeing recently, used very effectively, particularly in elementary classrooms. And on the other hand, you've got personal tablet computers, which into which you type things in, or sometimes you can draw them in on a touchboard. Bottom line, we are the teachers. The technology provides tools that help us teach more effectively. And that a tool, like any tool, a screwdriver or a pair of scissors or a pencil, is only effective if it's used for something that it will do effectively. You can't use a screwdriver to cut something. You can't use a scissors to hammer a nail. It's very much more difficult to use. You need to know where to use a tool where it is effective. And if you use it inappropriately, it may be unhelpful, it may even be harmful. So we need to think carefully about how to use it. An effective teacher needs to know what tools are available and how to use them, and how much using a particular tool contributes to learning. Remember the TITO acronym. The comparative value, this is what an effective teacher needs to know. the comparative value of the different types of tools and how they may be combined. I'm going to finish off with some practical ideas just for fun. And some of these are in my book, A Course in English Language Teaching, which I'll give you the reference to later. Writing. There's always a problem with writing that the teachers are worried that the students are going to get a just a second. Sorry, I've got a problem here. Right. The students are going to get GPT to do their writing for them. But one of the things you can do with ChatGPT or Gemini, or whatever you're using, is actually ask the students to compose the prompts and then show them what GPT has actually written for them. So a writing assignment like um, compose a detailed prompt for a text using an AI tool and then display the results together with your original prompt. Or, for example, um, sorry, again, I have run into a slight problem here. Um, um, or then following up from that, what was unexpected in the results? Could I have improved the prompt? All sorts of discussions about what you've done with the writing. Um, and something which we need to do these days, incidentally, I don't want to get too much into AI, that's a huge subject on its own, but students need to be taught how to use AI effectively, and one of the things they need to know is how to write a good prompt. Um, so a good prompt should include some or all of the following details, and these are some or all. And I think these are things which we need to teach our students. The students need to learn what is a good prompt for ChatGPT and how do I write it and what do I need to include, because very often if you don't include these things, ChatGPT will come back to you and say, yes, but I need to know. And then you have to add it in, um, and so on. Okay, my next example of use of the technology is in-depth text study. One interesting thing you can do is using the Google Translate or one of the other tools, AI tools for translating, um, is not to ignore translation, say you shouldn't translate, but let's look and see how I translate something and the technology translates something, the AI translates it, and what are the differences between how I do it and how a machine translation tool does it? Or let's put it into two different machine translations and see what they come up with and compare to see what the differences are. What the difference is, what version is preferable, what have I learned from the different kinds of different kinds of translations that AI used in one program as opposed to the one it used in the other. My third example of reading comprehension. And I did this myself once. Learners ask for factual information on something they're an expert on and see if AI gets it right, because AI sometimes fabricates something, as you know, it had what's called hallucination. Um, and or if it actually contribute extra facts that I didn't know before. For example, I actually put my own name into an AI tool and said, tell me about Penny Orr, and they actually got most of it right. That the only thing they got wrong was my date of birth. They made me a year younger than I actually am, but otherwise they were pretty good. But it was just an interesting experiment. My fourth example is writing. Um, Learners write a paragraph and get AI to improve it, and they have to specify how they want it. They look at the result. and then they display all the stages and see what has been learned. Speaking, learners perform and record a chat with an avatar, so like a chatbot like Kansei.com. And finally, I think this is my last example, descriptive writing. Learners write a description of a monster or a person or a scene, get AI to draw it. So I tried this one. This is my own thing. And asked AI, one of the AI tools, I think it was DALL-E, don't remember exactly. And I asked AI to draw it, and I got this. So it's quite fun to do. And it certainly motivates the students to write, because if they're going to get something lovely like this as a result, then it's worth doing the writing. Okay, just then a final postscript. Um, I went to a webinar this year, given by Russell Stannard, who's one of the experts on the use of digital tools in English teaching. And among other things, he said this: I've never been a big advocate of using technology necessarily in the lessons. What he says is it's mostly for out of lessons. I'll summarize in a second. But he says he doesn't actually, he's not actually in favor of using the digital tools within lessons. The lessons are the huge, important opportunity for face-to-face interaction, teaching, learning with the students. And it's a pity to use digital tools when you could actually use just yourself and your students. So he says he's actually he's an advocate of using technology, but not necessarily in face-to-face lessons. Thanks for the applause, Patricia. Okay, essentially, and here I want to just um, go into a little bit more detail on what I just said. The best learning is still that which is based on teacher learning, classroom interaction. The contribution of digital, including AI resources, is important mainly for, firstly, materials design, texts, exercises, tasks, and so on. For teacher preparation and follow-ups, as many of you said in the first questionnaire, many of you use it to help you prepare lessons and follow up using Moodle or any of the other programs. And for student out-of-class learning, when they're not in the lesson, they don't have you readily available, they can use the digital tools to help them continue to learn. Just want to add a couple of recommended resources. The YouTube videos by Russell Stannard. If you haven't come across these, they are brilliant, and they're very up to date and very accessible, so I recommend watching those. And articles and books by these names. Nikki and Gavin I know personally. Mark I don't, he lives in Australia, a bit farther away. But the books and articles by these people on the use of digital materials and technology in English language teaching are sensible, practical, but also very up to date in their knowledge of the background research and study. On AI, if you're interested on AI in itself, then articles by Ethan Mollick. So you can look at these at your leisure if you want to. Firstly, I've already sent this presentation to teacher development webinars, but also I'm just about to give you my email, and you can use it. It's very easy email. You can actually make it up. It's very obvious to get back to me and ask me any questions, or get me to send you the presentation and look at the references if you're interested. Okay, that's all from me. I'll just give you a moment, any of you who want to photograph or write down the email, and back to you. Okay, over to you. Thank you for listening, and just 5 minutes left before 10 o'clock for anybody who would like to. Thank you very much for all your reactions and hearts and things coming up on my screen. That's really nice to see. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Penny, for this wonderful webinar on technology and the balanced use of technology and AI tools, all these digital tools. So we got some time for questions and answers. If you got any questions for Penny, please feel free to share in the chat. I see there's a question from Fernando. He says, with AI tools like ChatGPT become more common, what opportunities and risks do you see for language learning?
I'm just seeing now some responses in the chat box. Thank you very much.
Sure.
And any questions which anyone would like
Yes.
to write in the chat box or
Yes. So there's one from Fernando. He asked, with
yes.
AI tools like ChatGPT becoming more common, what opportunities and risks do you see for language learning?
Um, I think I've summarized some of these in my presentation. But I think the main thing which is worrying teachers very much, and I just went to a recent webinar on this here. The thing which is worrying people is cheating. It's worrying people that students will write their essays, get ChatGPT or another of the tools to write essays for them, and what can you do about it? And there've been various suggestions. One is um, if it's a test, then actually getting the students to write it in class using pencil and paper, which is going back to low tech, and I think there's nothing wrong with that. That's one possibility. Another interesting one, incidentally, I would like to share with you, which I only learned yesterday from a colleague, is asking students to present to give you their essays if they're writing essays for assessment, or they're writing a project or a piece of research, to do it on Google Docs, not on Word, because with Google Docs you can look at all the previous versions and you can see if any of it has been copied, big chunks coming in from AI. So there's a couple of responses to that question. Thank you.
Mhm. Yeah,
Any
and with Google Docs, you can also collaborate with the students. They can collaborate, two or three students can work on a single Google Doc together. So that's quite useful.
very, yes, yes.
Yes, wonderful ideas. I see this, wonderful question coming up, and it's about future trends. So, looking ahead, what emerging technologies like AI and VR do you advise approaching with extra caution, and why?
What future I honestly don't know. I honestly don't know. I think I'd actually quite like to throw that question back at you guys. What do you see as future developments in AI? What do you think is going to, well, I think the example you gave of VR, virtual reality stuff, I'm not sure that that has proved itself, and that's been going for a while now. Virtual reality and enhanced reality, ER. And I don't see, or augmented reality, um, I don't see it being used very much, actually. There's a lot of sort of hype about it when it first started, but I haven't seen it developing very much. So the question is, what you think. I'd really like people to write in the chat box ways that they think that um, um, technological tools will develop for English teaching in the future, in the foreseeable future.
Yes, so let me see if there are any other questions. There's this one. How can teachers strike a balance between intriguing technology and maintaining traditional teaching methods to ensure that tech enhances rather than replaces core educational practices? So I think you have, answered this in your webinar, but if you could add
Yes, I
on
have.
that.
I think it's I think what's important is that you're asking the question. That's it, it's the question which needs to be asked. What is the balance? and let me look for the balance. Let me think about the balance, not just assume that digital is good. Digital is sometimes
Mm.
good and sometimes isn't. And I need to ask myself, in a sense, your very question answers the question because you are thinking about what is better, which means that you're going to consider it critically whenever you're planning your teaching procedures in the classroom.
Yeah, that's wonderful. And I see the question from Ms. Shako. She says, what other options available to teachers when learnings have challenge of accessing materials online?
I think you need to. I'm not enough of an expert on the new things that are coming up now. I think you look at the Russell Stannard videos, YouTube's, and you'll get lots and lots of ideas there, or some of the other references which I mentioned in my presentation.
Wonderful. So there's one question about evaluation and effect. What criteria should educators use to critically evaluate whether a specific tech tool is truly beneficial for their students?
It's interesting that although there are a lot of tools like Grammarly and various others, I don't recall the names now, which claim to be able to look at a piece of written work and give an evaluation, um, and assess, how good it is in terms of language accuracy and so on. But on the whole, what you said in the questionnaire which I gave at the beginning of this talk, what you said is that mostly you do your own correcting and assessment of written work, and the thing is that there are these tools like Grammarly is the most obvious one, which I think are very helpful. And the ideal combination is to run a text through Grammarly to get their input, but not to leave it at that. Uh, the ideal combination is teacher plus AI. That's where you get the optimal results because Grammarly, and I've experimented with not only Grammarly but other tools as well, for a automated evaluation, what's called AWE, automated written evaluation. Um, and what I've found is that very occasionally they will correct incorrectly. Very occasionally they will miss something which should have been corrected, and very occasionally they will actually correct something which didn't need correcting. So most of the time they're okay. They do it right, and they're really helpful. And so the ideal combination is to ask one of the tools to correct and assess, but then not leave it at that, but go through it yourself and check and add your own input.
Wonderful, very well answered. So maybe one last question for teachers who are hesitant about tech due to their past experience, due to ed constraints. How can they start incorporating tools critically without, feeling overwhelmed?
Um, I'm not sure I understood the question. What is the problem with incorporating tools? Teachers who are just beginning or
Yes,
teachers?
teachers who are hesitant about incorporating technology. Yes, how can they, take a start
Um,
incorporating?
Two answers just jumped to my mind. First of all, don't worry. It's not so awful if you don't use the technology. Teachers have been teaching languages effectively for years and years and years without, and you can carry on doing it. So if you're not using a technology, don't feel guilty about it. And the second answer is consult colleagues. There's really no substitute for more experienced colleagues in the school, um, and or even outside the school, people who you can get in touch with online to consult. Um, those are the two main answers. A, don't worry. B, consult. And the third answer is to look up, as I say, the YouTubes by Russell Stannard or the books and articles which I've recommended in my book list on the presentation.
Awesome. So that's it for today. Thank you so much, Penny, for this wonderful talk. And it's always pleasure having you at teacher development webinars. And it's almost fifth webinar together. I'm glad we were able to make it on such a big day for us as we mark our fifth anniversary. I really appreciate your commitment to English language teaching and taking out time this morning for us. So yeah, thank you all in attendance. If you're interested in sharing this webinar with colleagues, this recording will be available on Teacher Development Webinars YouTube channel. For future updates, you can always email us at info.tdwebinars@gmail.com. If you're interested in getting the certificates for the session, you can email us. We're available on all our social media channels, X, LinkedIn, Instagram, Facebook. And again, just to remind you, please share this recording with a colleague who you want to help with technology and digital tools. Recording will be available on YouTube channel. So yeah, that was all from our side. Thank you very much. Take good care. Bye bye.
Thank you. Bye.